Welcome to Pinsari Basketball. Today, we are going to be talking about Bruce Brown and the Toronto Raptors. The Toronto Raptors have a big decision to make with Bruce Brown, and basically, that decision will become a domino that percolates and goes through the entire offseason. It will give the first clear indication of what the Toronto Raptors actually plan to do with their free agency and in terms of the cap space that they have managed to accumulate through shedding of long-term salaries, potential long-term salaries and contract extensions. It might give a hint also in terms of why they chose to re-sign Kelly Olynyk or negotiating that extension last season as opposed to waiting for this offseason. And it may possibly cue the OG Ananobi pursuit and a lot of rumors that may happen to start because, as y'all know, if you've been watching this channel, I've been pretty much firm on this. OG Ananobi is going to be a Raptors target thing since he was traded. So let's see. But nevertheless, before free agency is the draft, and before the draft potentially comes a major decision about Bruce Brown. Now, a little bit of a few things we're going to talk about before we talk about the three trades that I believe are realistic. They benefit not only the Toronto Raptors, but also the teams that I would be doing this deal with. There's a rationale why these teams would want to do it. There's a rationale why the Raptors would want to do it as well. In terms of why Bruce Brown isn't a long term fit, well, that's not even determined yet that he's not a long term fit. There were some knee issues, right? We talked about it. He has been a winner pretty much everywhere he's gone. He won obviously a championship with Denver, and he was a really big part of what they did. And everyone talked about it all throughout the playoffs as Denver was struggling. Oh man, they really missed Bruce Brown. That wasn't bad for his PR campaign. And while you may think that he is overpaid, and you would be very right that $23 million is a crazy overpay for Bruce Brown, please understand that when he was a free agent, he had offers in the 15 million, 14, 15 million range. He is every bit. He went into last season every bit as valued as a guy like Josh Hart. And obviously, they've had very different seasons, and those valuations may be very different right now. But GMs don't forget so easy, right? Fans may turn, ESPN may turn, but a GM will see the value of a Bruce Brown, especially in particular contexts around particular players. And I think there's a broader concept here of why a team may want to trade for Bruce Brown that has a lot to do with the salary floor. I apologize. Hold on one second here. I'm losing my voice a little bit again. In terms of the salary floor and also the second apron. So, in terms of how he fit with the Toronto Raptors, obviously, it was a very clunky fit. And I think a lot of that had to do with the fact that Jakob Poeltl wasn't playing and Scotty Barnes wasn't playing. So if you are the Toronto Raptors brass and you saw maybe Bruce Brown as a longer term fit with the organization, given that he is just 27 years old, given that there were parallels to how he played with Jokic versus how you want to play with Scotty, all that stuff, there's still that option of keeping him. Now, if you want to keep him, you probably don't want to pick up that team option. What you could do instead of doing that is you could basically just let that option expire and you could just sign him back. And you could sign him back to something a little bit more reasonable, but a little bit more long term. Gives him some assurance. And he doesn't really have any negotiation power, right? That's kind of the trade-off of signing the deal that he signed is he doesn't exactly he doesn't get to control his place here. So what we're going to do is we're going to use the trade machine and we're going to show three trades, but I'm also not completely off the let him expire and bring him back. He's a very serviceable role player. And you could argue that, if Bruce Brown is one of the 8 best players on your team, you're not necessarily sunk. If he's your 4th starter, you're probably screwed. So there has to be some respect given to the fact that Bruce Brown is not nearly as bad as he was with the Raptors. And maybe he's not nearly as good as he was hyped up with the Nuggets, but he's somewhere in between. So in terms of what the Raptors have already done, obviously they've cleared a ton of cap space for this offseason, right? They have a big decision to make with Gary Trent Jr. But in terms of the long-term pieces that are on their roster next season, long-term, past next year, it's Grady, it's RJ, presumably it's Emmanuel Quickly, potentially it's Jakob Poeltl, and maybe even Kelly Olynyk with the 2-year deal, and perhaps Ochai Agbaji. Beyond that, it's open season. Okay, y'all, give me 1 second here. I'm really having trouble with my throat here. Just give me 1 sec. I'll be right back. Okay. So Um, my bad. All right, let's just get to this, and let's talk about the first. Hold on, I'm sorry. I'm a little bit scattered here. Just give me 1 second to find myself. I will find myself. Last night's live went so smooth. This one's going a little bit bumpy because I keep feeling this need to cough, and I don't know why. Um, it's a long road back for when you quit smoking. It's just constant. Okay. So, in terms of what he does well, he's a great cutter. He's a good team defender. Now, obviously, if you flank him with terrible defenders around him and you ask him to be a point of attack guy, he's going to struggle, right? So the Raptors could sell themselves on this idea of bringing him back because they could say, hey, well, let's see what he looks like with us. We all know Masai Ujiri and Bobby Webster love to kick the can down the road, right? But in terms of, exploring options to trade him, well, there's some benefit to that as well. Number one, you have cap space and a lot of teams are super capped out. And this would be the opportunity to park your cap space. Now, the minute you pick this option up and you trade him for any long term salary back, you are pretty much kissing your cap space goodbye. So, if they do decide to let him expire, there's a really good chance that that cues up, oh, free agency. They got like a real target. If they trade him for a pick, which is just not going to happen, in my opinion, you're going to trade him for salary or you're going to trade him for nothing. You're going to trade him for lesser salary. You're going to trade him for something. You're gonna attach a pick to him or something. Like I cannot see a world in which you straight up take his $23 million and just throw him to somebody because he's not worth 23 million. There's no team in the world that will make that trade, that at all. And what I don't like about a lot of trade shows and a lot of trade videos, especially when the person making the trade is making it from the Celtics side or the Raptors side or whatever, is they only think about what works for their team, but they don't think about what happens for the other team. So let's explore three trades without further ado. We're 7 minutes in, enough rambling. We've talked about the benefits of having Bruce Brown. So we'll talk a little bit more about that, but let's explore that side of it. Okay. So here we go. Here we go. Here we go. Okay. So we got this. All right, we got the trade machine fired up. The first trade that I'm going to make is actually with the Golden State Warriors, who are a second apron team. Actually, it should have just made the Grizzlies one. Could have had that open, but let's go with the Warriors first. So this one requires a little bit of faith on your end. If you're the Toronto Raptors, this is going to require a little bit of faith from you. And the faith that is going to be required is you got to believe that Andrew Wiggins is better than he showed last year and something closer to what he showed the previous 2 years. This is a guy who a lot of people felt could have been a finals MVP 2 years ago. Let us not be such prisoners of the moment that we completely forget that Andrew Wiggins is not washed. He is barely older than Bruce Brown, and he is a much better player than Bruce Brown. Even last year, I think there's a case to be made that he was just about as good. But the upside on Andrew Wiggins, plus the Canadian connection, marketing for MLSC, who's hiking tickets, never underestimate the greed of a corporation and this idea of pairing RJ Barrett and Andrew Wiggins in the same starting lineup on a Canadian team might just be too much for MLSC to pass up on. Even if both guys are considered overpaid for where they are, where they're at, they could just sell themselves on the idea of, hey, the cap is going to go up next CBA, et cetera, et cetera. This won't be such a bad deal. And if the home cooking thing works, then Andrew Wiggins could be something of a salvation story, and you could flip him later. Or if he really does work out for you, why would you even want to flip him? Because at 28, 26 million, 27 million, whatever the next 3 years, he's actually pretty worth it if he ends up becoming the player that he was a couple of years ago. And what is the player that he was? A really, really good defender and a really good transition athlete. We are also going to add Kevon Looney to this. Now, why are we adding Kevon Looney? The Raptors have a lack of serviceable players on their team. They have guys like Chris Boucher who didn't want to play. And honestly, Kevon Looney is Jakob Poeltl insurance to some extent, right? I mean, last year the Raptors were pretty sunk without a center. I don't love the idea of Kevon Looney, but he is an expiring contract, and the Raptors love flexibility. Kevon Looney does add that flexibility. The third thing that I'm going to add to this is Moses Moody. I'm going to add Moses Moody because I'm not greedy enough to add Brandon Pajimski, but hey, I think I like this deal. Now, what's going back to Golden State? What's going back to Golden State is Chris Boucher, back to where he started. Get a Canadian, lose a Canadian. You're going to get Bruce Brown, and you're going to get my least favorite Raptor potentially of all time. Not really. He's my like fourth least favorite Raptor of all time, and that's Jalen McDaniels. That is a ton of cap flexibility on 3 expiring contracts. Okay. So 1, 2, 3. We're going to try this trade, and it is going to work. I do not know. You know what I think it is? I just had popcorn. We were watching The Equalizer. My girlfriend and I were watching The Equalizer, and I think popcorn is just irritating my throat. So I apologize this. Okay. So why for the Golden State Warriors? Well, a little bit of cap flexibility for a team that is a second apron team. You get expiring contracts, which is probably good if you plan to buy out any of these players. You could buy them out; and they wouldn't count against your cap, so that would be good. Chris Boucher, 10.8 million, serviceable player. You get 3 serviceable role players for 3 serviceable role players. For the Raptors, you get a little bit younger. Okay, that is the upside here. You do get a little bit younger. You get 3 guys who are better than Ochai Abashi. So Moses Moody to me is a type of 14th overall pick that is actually worth the development dollars and development time that you're actually going to put into this. I think he's better than Ochai Abaji, just my opinion. He's also familiar to Scotty. He was on the same Mom Bird team. They're friends, so that helps. He's also a guy who has shooting upside. That also helps. He also has super long wingspan. Look, if you're going to invest all this money and all this time, there's a trade-off with everything. If you are going to focus 90% of your attention in terms of coaching on development, if everything that you're bringing in, Darko, Jama, etc., every one of these guys, they're aces, they're development coaches. Well, then you might as well get guys who are worth developing. Okay. And Andrew Wiggins, despite the fact that he's 29 years old, he may still have a little bit to get better at, right? This might be a Pascal Siakam thing where, Darko can work with him and bring out parts of his game that have yet been sort of untapped. So I don't hate this trade. The downside, obviously, for the Toronto Raptors is you do take on 2 extra years of risk with the Andrew Wiggins thing. The upside here is you keep the asset, you don't lose Bruce Brown for quote unquote nothing. And if you aren't planning on using your cap space, why create more bad contracts when there are already bad contracts to take on? And here you get Moses Moody as a consolation prize. For the Warriors, this makes a lot of sense because you don't really have the capacity to pay Moses Moody. Now, I'm not sure what Moses Moody commands as a restricted free agent, but he is contract eligible this summer, just like Scotty Barnes, same draft class, right? So he is technically extension eligible this summer. SP saying Looney only has 3 million guaranteed. Facts. And that is a big reason why I think the Toronto Raptors could potentially do this, but I also think the Warriors maybe would prefer to, and also they have a player option on Gary Payton III. They could also waive Kevon Looney, right? Like he's totally waivable, and that's definitely a viable option for the Golden State Warriors. However, I do believe that for the Raptors, Kevon Looney could be worth $8 million easily. If you don't like Kevon Looney, I mean, there's other ways to go about this, right? If you don't want to take on Kevon Looney, or if they don't want to take a Kevon Looney because they feel like, hey, he's got enough. You could potentially, who else could you take on? You could take Kevon and you could take Chris Boucher out of this deal, and I imagine it would still work, right? So in this case, you would do if you wanted to look at it from Golden State's side and say, hey, they would just rather waive Kevon so they can get under the second apron, okay? Because it is a very expensive team to not be in the playoffs, and I get that. So you could also do this. This would be an amended trade, and then the Raptors could explore potential Chris Boucher packages. What I wanted to say before we started this, and I was struggling to find my brain on it, the Raptors did explore Bruce Brown trades at the deadline. The problem with exploring Bruce Brown trades at the deadline was that because of the trade restriction that he was under, he couldn't actually be packaged with anybody. Now he can be. He can also be packaged with the 19th overall pick, and that's what we're going to do in the next trade. Okay, so let's try trade number 2, and that is going to be with the Sacramento Kings. And I apologize to anyone who has gotten overly attached to that 19th overall pick because it is going. It is going in this trade, and it is going to the Sacramento Kings. So the first thing there, and then the second thing, we are going to trade Indiana's 19th overall pick to the Kings. And in exchange, we are going to get back Kevin Herter and his 16.8 million 2-year deal. Okay. We are going to get back Sasha Vazenkov, and we are going to get back the 13th overall pick. Okay. The Raptors just took on a lot of salary for why, right? Well, there's a version of this trade that makes a ton of sense for both sides. For the Toronto Raptors, you do get a little bit younger. Kevin Herter is just a tad younger. And let's just try this trade, make sure I'm not losing my mind. It does work. So Herter is, in my opinion, a better defender than people give him credit for. Okay. Bruce Brown, in my opinion, is a worse defender than people give him credit for. Herter and Sasha Vazenkov are not a really big part of what Sacramento plans to do going forward. Okay. I do think that this that Bruce Brown will replace some of what they potentially lose with Malik Monk. He's not Malik Monk. I get it. Malik is a much better player. But that playmaking, versatile wing, you would get a little bit of that back with Bruce Brown. At least much more of it than you had with Kevin Herter and Sasha Vazenkov. There's also an argument to be made that when your best two players are De'Aaron Fox and DeMontis Sabonis, neither of whom are good defenders, it helps to have plus defenders around them. Now, I'm not saying Bruce Brown is some sort of defensive stopper. He's not OG Anunoby. He's not someone who's going to elevate your defense by himself, but he is not a bad defender. He's not going to hurt your defense. And with the emergence of Keon Ellis, I think this is a deal that makes sense. Now, why would Toronto do this? As I said, shooters around Scotty, a younger player in Kevin Herter, which makes a little bit of sense. Sasha Vazenkov is a flyer. You're taking a very, very accomplished EuroLeague player that maybe Darko will have a bit of a better connection with than Mike Brown did, and you move up 6 places in the NBA draft. Okay, why would you want to move up 6 places in the NBA draft? I think there's a chance that a certain Serbian prospect might be falling down draft boards because of a certain injury. And if he is available at 13, this could be the deal, in my opinion, that works for both sides. It could be contingent on him being available at 13, but basically, you're getting 2 shooters and a rim pressure attacker for the 19th overall pick and Bruce Brown. I think it's a great deal. Um, Andre saying, "Do you think Bruce is better than Herter?" Um, I think they're different, to put it very lightly. I think one of them is taking a bit of a beating in terms of where his stock is at right now, and the other one is also taking a bit of a beating. I think they're both suppressed assets, and I think they could both shine in a different situation. And I do think Kevin Herter is younger, and yeah, I think he's more talented than Bruce Brown. Um, Okay. And yeah, again, shooters around Scotty, not even okay. Compelling saying even if Topic isn't there, McCain would be great at 13. Yeah. Jared Osei saying 13th overall picks have been great. Kobe, Booker, and Mitchell. Yeah, and let's not forget Grady Dick. I'm just kidding. But yes, Grady Dick. There's a lot of great players at 13. I'm saying you move up 6 places in the first round. You also there's another benefit of moving up this much in the first round is that you actually leapfrog a whole bunch of teams that are really, really good at drafting. Go look at who's drafting 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. Come back to me and tell me, do you really want to be picking behind those teams? I guarantee you get a better player at 13 than you would get at 19. I guarantee you the player that you would take at 13 is not going to be there at 19. So you leapfrog the heap a little bit. And I don't know, for Raptor fans who are a little bit upset that they lost the 8th pick, maybe you feel a little bit better getting the 13th pick. I have no idea. Um, Dan Damon saying, why does Sacktown do this? As I mentioned, Sacramento gets off of a little bit of salary, right? Sasha Vazenkov is dead salary to them. He wasn't really in their rotation very much last year. And then you have Kevin Herter, who's also kind of outside their rotation. They've made a very big investment in Bruce Brown. Sorry, in Mike Brown. And Bruce Brown is a 1-year salary filler. If he doesn't work out for you, boom. There's also the added implication here of being a pretty expensive team at this point in a pretty small market. The 19th overall pick makes a little bit less money than the 13th overall pick. Maybe that isn't exactly the team that's enamored with this draft. You're going to have to look at this outside of the lens of the Raptors here. Something that I talked about a lot when I was talking about whether or not the Raptors would want to convey this pick or not was that these picks are overpriced. That whoever's there, 13, 8, 4, etc., will be making money that is not typical for a player of their talent level, right? You have to understand that these first round draft picks, especially high lottery picks, are the best assets in the NBA. But what if there was a year? I'll just give you an example. Let's say last year, right? Last year, we had Victor Wembanyama going number one, Scoot Henderson, Brandon Miller. Those are the top three picks, right? Then you had Amen Thompson, I believe, went number four. Asar Thompson went number five. That was the draft order, right? Asar went number five to Detroit, and then Anthony Black went number six. Okay. Now I want you to imagine that, right at deadline day, all six of those guys withdrew from the draft. Okay. So now the seventh overall pick was Bilal Coulibaly. He's now the first overall pick. Okay. How do you feel about the draft? That's the point. Do you want to trade for the first overall pick? No, you don't. And that's my point. That's basically this draft in a nutshell. So, you've basically plucked out the top six talents of this draft and you're left with the rest. That doesn't mean that there isn't going to be a good player. Of course, there's going to be a good player. It just means that the guy you pick at 3, 4, 5 is going to be slightly overpaid relative to his contemporaries or people who have also been picked at 3, 4, 5. And, for the Sacramento Kings, who are kind of up against the rails in terms of money, and for teams like Memphis that are up against the rails in terms of roster spots and also money, these expensive rosters are not going to be, taking on these project players with the 9th pick or the 12th pick. I think the Raptors, if you're the Toronto Raptors, you really like somebody at the draft, you have to just call other teams bluffs, because I don't think that a team like Sacramento or Memphis or Chicago or any of these teams, frankly, are licking their chops to draft a player in this range. I just don't believe that. Lindo said Pistons had the 5th pick. Correct. Yes. This is the year of the scouting departments. Momo saying Raptors need to find a Norman Powell pick. Well, you have the 31st overall pick to be able to do that. All right, let's go to the third trade. And the third trade will be with the Memphis Grizzlies. And it will be for Ja Morant. No, I'm kidding. It will not be for Ja Morant. I apologize. The stakes have been raised so high. We will be trading Bruce Brown. We will also be trading. No, we will just be trading Bruce Brown. In exchange, we will get Marcus Smart and we will get Santi Aldama. Now, for the Toronto Raptors, why do you do this? You get 2 players who are absolutely rotation players for you next year. And for the Memphis Grizzlies, you get off of 1 year of Marcus Smart's contract. Look, man, they traded for him. You can make a case that they traded for him for a reason. You can also make a case that they're a very expensive roster as well. And clearing out that cap space and maybe shopping Bruce Brown as an expiring contract as opposed to rolling the dice with Marcus Smart, potentially him being injured. Santi Aldama is an expense that they will not be able to re-sign, in my opinion. They're a small market team. You have to look at their roster and just look at the contracts on their roster. So this is the way the Raptors, in my opinion, have to think. Okay. You get a guy like Santi Aldama, who is, frankly, in my opinion, just very underrated and waiting for a bigger opportunity. It does give you a little bit of flexibility to move off of Kelly Olynyk should the deal, free itself up. It does give you a youngish player to work with as a front court player, and the Raptors do not have any, given the fact that the last youngish players they had in terms of front court players were Jonte Porter and Christian Koloko, and that didn't work out for them. So in terms of why Memphis does it, it's simple. It's just savings. You're saving more money. You're getting expiring contract as opposed to 2 years of Marcus Smart. And I already brought up Marcus Smart. Dan Damon saying Memphis would want to pick two. Then Memphis can keep their offer. We don't need it. This is the whole point, right? You're not desperate. You're not desperate. You're not a title contender right now. You're not trying to appease a star who's about to leave, Cleveland, right? You don't have any expectations next year. There's no aging star that's like, oh my God, we have one more year of Steph Curry. You're also not up against the wall in terms of the salary cap. You're not like super capped out and having to clear cap, and everybody knows you have to clear cap. So the Toronto Raptors have ultimate flexibility. They have a lot of options. Now, optionality is only as good as the time that you have to make the options, at which point, I think Blake Murphy talks about this a lot in his commentary where he says it's good to have options, but at some point, those options do have expiration dates. And that's true. And with Bruce Brown, you can definitely kick the can down the road as the Raptors have been known to do. And you can probably wait till the trade deadline and see if something opens up. But then you're up against the wall again. And that's, I think, something that's been a bit of a blind spot with the Raptors. Everyone knew they had to make a trade for Pascal. Everyone knew they had to make a trade. And that's the problem. You get yourself up against the wall where everybody knows that you're desperate. They knew that the Raptors didn't want to commit long term to OG and Pascal. They knew that. Everyone knew that. It was an open secret in the NBA. It's been an open secret for 2 years that this team wanted to see if they would be winners with that core. And when they weren't winning, the writing was on the wall. So teams were able to lowball them. I'm sure you got to think about this. Pascal Siakam was traded for Bruce Brown, Jordan Nwora, Kyra Lewis, and 3 first-round picks. That's the deal they took. Imagine the deals they rejected, right? So you got to think about it from that perspective. If you trade Pascal Siakam a year earlier, I mean, Bruce Brown's not Pascal Siakam. OG Anunoby is not Bruce Brown. I get it, right? These are different players, different situations. But actually, you almost wish that you did have a Pascal Siakam. You almost wish Pascal's, contract expired a year later. Because right now, could you trade Pascal Siakam to Detroit? Like if you had him as on contract, could you trade him to Detroit with that new front office, Trajan Langdon? Could you trade him right now to Detroit for Asar Thompson, Jaden Ivey, and like their pick this year? Or like Beef Stew, Asar Thompson and their pick this year, or something crazy like that? You probably could. That's the thing. You probably could. So that's the thing. I think the Toronto Raptors should move off of Bruce Brown. I would not be enamored, excited, or even remotely happy with him coming back. I don't think he's necessarily the greatest fit. I do want someone a little bit younger. If I'm going to have a player who's quote unquote this good, like too good to not play, then I want a player who's a little bit younger, or I want a player who fits a little bit better. Now, you can make a case that if you were a title contender or if you were trying to pursue something, like meaningful in the playoffs, like a second round, third round, whatever, that he's probably going to help you. His experience would help you in that situation. His skill set is very unique for a player his size. He has this versatility and switchability, which people often ignore. The fact that a guy can guard 2, 3 positions reasonably well or play 2, 3, 4 positions reasonably well offensively makes you a Swiss Army knife. And other GMs really value that because they know that he can slot in as your 4. He can slot in as your 2. He can slot in as your 3. He can potentially even play 1 in a pinch sometimes. He did play 1 a little bit for the Toronto Raptors this year. That type of versatility does not grow on trees. There may be like 20 players in the entire league that can do what Bruce Brown does. So I would say maybe 25 to 30, right? So your goat saying, yo, dude, I just brought up the Pistons and you show up. That's hilarious. Nah, Langdon is not dumb like Weaver. We shall see. I mean, look, we've heard a lot of potentially rumors out there this summer already about potentially teams like the San Antonio Spurs, et cetera, making like really big plays for Darius Garland, et cetera. And I understand Pascal Siakam's not Darius Garland, but sorry, is there a buzzing noise? Y'all hearing that? My bad. I apologize. Anyways, so yeah, let me know in the comments below what you think about these 3 trades. We're going to be back to draft stuff tomorrow, and I will post that Amazon wish list and e-transfer stuff and whatever, all the links that I said I would do yesterday. I'll post that in subsequent videos going forward. Andre Lindo saying, I like Bruce to Utah. That's interesting. I didn't think about Utah, partially because I don't necessarily think Danny Ainge is the guy I want to be dealing with. But yeah. Alrighty, y'all. I'll talk to y'all later. And again, let me know in the comments below which of these three trades you liked. And if you didn't like these three trades, let me know a trade that you think would work for Bruce Brown. All right. Hit like, subscribe. It's the best way to help this channel grow. Appreciate y'all for showing up to a 30-minute live. And to those of you who watch these lives regularly, 30 minutes is probably the shortest one I've done in a long time. So appreciate y'all. And I apologize for all the coughing and the technical difficulties. All right. Peace.